When 6,000 women turned up to march for better working rights, a lot of people were unhappy. But when miners got better pay and working conditions, it started to be seen as a revolution in unions that reflected the strength, cohesiveness, and initiative of the women in the mining community. This 3-day long march that took place in December of 1921 was dubbed the Amazon Army by the New York Times newspaper, and it had a lasting impact on labor rights, including changes in mine working conditions and the pay that miners received. The Amazon Army strikes also changed many things involving the responsibilities of the miners. It determined that the corporations had the responsibility to pay workers better, to give them better working conditions, and that the state did not have the responsibility to involve the Court of Industrial Relations.
Picture this. You were a mine worker living in Kansas in 1921. You were getting paid between $5.50 to $7.50 a day. You were also working for 12 hours a day for 6 days a week. Many people would try to go on strike, but there was a problem with that. The Court of Industrial Relations had been introduced in 1920. It controlled much of the miners and made it illegal for miners to strike. Many miners were against this, and in September 1921, they attempted to strike. Another factor that played into the strike was the act of putting the Kansas district president for the United Mine Workers of America, Alexander Howitt, in jail. That strike did not end well for them. All striking miners were suspended from the union. This caused many families to lose one of their sources of income, strike benefits from the union treasury. By early December 1921, all mines were back up and running. There were still some others who believed this treatment was unfair to the men, and they knew they could take action and attempt to help the miners. That group was the Amazon Army.
The Amazon Army was a march of 6,000 women. These were all women with something in common. They had family members working in the mines, and they believed that the way these people were being treated was not okay. These 6,000 women banded together to strike for better working conditions and pay in the mines. It was a 3-day-long strike from December 12, 1921 to December 14, 1921. The strike was started by about 500 women. However, most of their names were not reported. One of the ones that was found, though, was Mary Skubitz. The women gathered at the Franklin Miners Hall, which has been turned into a mining museum, and would head to strike from there. The strike went from 3,000 women on the first day, to 4,000 on the second day, and then to 6,000 on the third day. The women would go around to different mines and force the workers out of the mines. Workers were forced to kiss the American flag and then swear obedience to Alexander Howitt, the leader of the United Mine Workers of America. The women also laid down American flags on the roads and dared workers to drive over them. The women would throw bricks into cars and throw red pepper flakes at anyone who opposed them. After 3 days of striking, Henry Allen, the governor of Kansas at the time, called in the National Guard to come and stop the strikers. They came in the next day, bringing with them a machine gun attachment from Lawrence. What he didn't know was that the women would come up with a plan. On December 15, 1921, as the National Guard was arriving in Kansas, the women stopped striking. They were acting like nothing had ever happened, completely lying to newspapers and reporters and ignoring every accusation and question about the strike. Some of the women even tried flirting with the guards to get out of consequences and to convince them that they had done nothing wrong. Surprisingly, the flirting worked for the women, and they ended up with many less than they had anticipated in jail.
Some of the main key factors that played into the strike were the Court of Industrial Relations, the Kansas governor, Henry Allen, the women's families, and the child labor laws. The Court of Industrial Relations largely affected this strike through some of the laws they passed. The main law that caused this was the law that made it illegal for the miners themselves to strike. This did not sit well with many, but since miners couldn't strike, the women all had to do it for them. Henry Allen, the Kansas governor at the time, also had a big impact on the strike. Henry Allen was the person who sent in the troops in with machine guns to stop the protest and protect the peace. The wives, being the ones that had to strike, also had a large effect on the march. There were the days when wives could not go or did not have time because they still had to take care of children, maintain the house, or even miss out specifically because it was baking day. The child labor laws at the time also affected the strike. Children were forced to work for 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. Those hours were very unsafe for kids, which helped drive some of their mothers to strike for their rights.
The Court of Industrial Relations was a three-person group that was put together in early 1920 to help work out labor disputes. However, this tribunal made it illegal to strike. This greatly harmed many miners in 1920, taking away people's incomes and putting a lot of miners in jail. But the Amazon Army was striking for this too. Their march took the Court of Industrial Relations to the Supreme Court, and an incredible amount of the court's rulings got overturned. The Court of Industrial Relations soon disbanded. The Amazon Army March changed the rights that miners and their families had, as well as changed the responsibilities of the Court of Industrial Relations. Miners got much better work rights, such as the 8-hour workday, child labor laws, and a large increase in daily pay.
The Amazon Army had a big impact on miner pay and working conditions, which has carried over to today. The daily pay around the time was $5.50 to $7.50 daily, or about $96 to $131 in today's dollars. That has changed to about $210 a day. Working hours have also changed from 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, to 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. It also had a big effect on the Court of Industrial Relations. After the strike had ended, Alexander Howitt decided that the Court of Industrial Relations needed to be disbanded. The issue was brought to the Supreme Court, and they ruled that the Court of Industrial Relations needed to be disbanded as well. This removed much of the power that the government had over the miners and gave the miners the ability to strike back. This also gave more responsibility to companies. These companies now had to pay miners more and had to give them better working conditions. Miners have better rights, pay, and working conditions because of the fact that a march of over 6,000 women from over 100 years ago decided that they needed to work to change miners' rights for many years to come.
Alien Women, for Clemence Merciez de Gruson. In 21, my mother still herself, at 17, marched for Alexander Howitt to bust the scabs who worked the mines in place of the fathers and husbands of the 1,000 women who marched with her carrying their men's pit buckets filled with red pepper to throw in the eyes of the poor scabs who cursed back in English to the Slovene, German, French, and Italian over the state militia's rifle fire. It's all dim in her mind now. She remembers only that she was hungry and frightened. She does not remember Judge Curran, who said, "It is a fact that there are Bolsheviki, communists, and anarchists among the alien women of this community. It was the lawlessness of these women which made necessary the stationing of the state militia in our county for 2 months to preserve law and order." She does not remember they were called an army of Amazons.